Here's what I know is true. Most weight loss plans are one size fits all. So frustrating. They don't take into account each person's individual needs, which could mean dietary restrictions, medical issues, or other personal needs. That's why you're going to love Noom. It's built for your psychology and your biology, meeting you where you are. Noom's personalized programs feel more sustainable than any other, more restrictive weight loss programs. And also, it doesn't shame you when you choose to treat yourself, and that's important. I like this company because it's got a psychology and biology-based approach and a super easy app to use with lots of great features, including daily lessons, coaching, and flexibility. I think it's your time to start. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. Based on 3.5-year study of actively engaged Noom users with minimum BMI of 25. Individual results may vary. Visit Noom.com for more information.
Today, the beverage aisle looks a lot different than it used to. America's beverage companies are working together. We're delivering the options everyone wants. In fact, nearly 60% of beverages Americans buy have zero sugar. You'll find more variety than ever, including more of your favorites, now available with zero sugar. You'll also find more sizes and clear calorie information on the front of every can, bottle, and pack. We know when it comes to finding balance, the more choices, the better.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey, and welcome back for this very special Saturday series guest. Today's guest is Tracy Walder, one of several women featured in American Manhunt Osama bin Laden, which is an excellent 3-part docuseries on Netflix. It premieres next week and tells the story of the CIA's hunt for Osama bin Laden. Did you know that many female CIA analysts were key to tracking down Osama bin Laden and the capture of al-Qaeda's leader in 2011? Many female analysts noticed the threat of al-Qaeda in the early 1990s, but their warnings were often ignored. These women were part of a mostly female team that became known as the Sisterhood. Female analysts compiled intelligence on bin Laden and other al-Qaeda targets. Tracy Walder is one of the few women to serve in both the Directorate of Operations of the CIA and as a special agent at the FBI. She worked in special ops during the 9/11 era, including frequent meetings with President George W. Bush. From 2000 to 2004, Tracy served the CIA's Counterterrorism Center Weapons of Mass Destruction Group, followed by the FBI's Chinese Counterintelligence team. During her time at the CIA, Tracy traveled to war zones and many other countries. She's received many awards for her service from both the CIA and foreign intelligence offices. After leaving the CIA, she became a special agent at the FBI's Los Angeles office, specializing in Chinese counterintelligence operations, but is now an adjunct professor of criminal justice at Texas Christian University. Her book, The Unexpected Spy, which you all need to read, has been optioned by Netflix along with Wonderland Sound and Vision Productions. She sits on the board of directors of Girl Security and has joined NewsNation as a national security contributor. What a force. Again, make sure you go out and get her book, The Unexpected Spy. Here is my interview with Tracy Walder. So I'm watching this documentary that was sent to me from Netflix called American Manhunt Osama bin Laden, which I, of course, review this coming week. I have an interview with the directors and was thrilled to learn about the women from the CIA that were so involved in the hunt for Osama bin Laden. And it turns out one of them is actually from California. So Tracy Walder, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. I am seriously a huge fan of yours. So this is so exciting.
It is so weird.
Why is that weird? I am a huge fan. I listen to you pretty much every day on my drive back and forth to Fort Worth from Dallas.
Amazing. Well, I feel like we were meant to be friends because listening to your story and reading your book, I find your life to be so fascinating. And I have to first say, I'm so grateful for the work that you have done. And I know that CIA agents are not considered, under the military. And so you're uncomfortable sometimes when people say thank you for your service. But I feel like now after watching that documentary and reading your book, how important it is for me to pass on to everybody else. If you meet somebody and they work for the CIA, it is important to thank them for what they've done, because I feel like you don't get the recognition that you deserve, and most certainly the women.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Yes, obviously I get uncomfortable. I guess the whole point, right, of the CIA is they never really know that you work there unless there's a big mistake, right? A failure. Pretty much how you hear about the CIA. And we can never talk about our successes, but I think I just sort of got used to that. So thank you for that.
I'm almost shocked in the year 2025 that people even say they work for the CIA, because I feel like I grew up in a time where it was so secretive. Like you would talk to somebody and they had a job, but you were sort of, or at least me, because I'm a weirdo, I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Like they probably are, that's some sort of cover job. Maybe it's my own life experience, but is it some sort of cultural shift where now you can be a little bit more open about what you did and what your job was?
I think that's actually a really good question. Honestly, I've never been asked that before. And like when I reflect on it, I think the answer is I don't think that there has been a cultural shift, to be honest with you. I think it's more sexy, right, for pop culture to show an officer in like this like deep cover state, right? I think that's sexy, right? That's what sells. That's what interests people. And I think that's totally fine. But the reality is most CIA employees actually don't have cover unless, and that's why in my book, there's sections redacted, we go overseas. And so I had cover, obviously, when I went overseas. And that's why I can't talk about some of the locations that I was in. But when I was stateside, I guess, I technically was not a covert employee. And the reality is neither were a lot of my friends. And we were all on the operations side. And so I think there's just a misconception of how one, cover works, right? And two, how it's portrayed in the media. I'm not like slamming the media. I think it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, maybe also more shows and movies that have highlighted this job has made it a little bit more, it's made it easier for people to understand the complexity of the job.
100%. In a way, like if I watch Zero Dark 30, for example, I don't know how much you've seen that. It actually makes it really easy for me to tell people what I used to do, because I say, hey, just watch Zero Dark 30. Jessica Chastain character, that's exactly what I used to do. And it's very helpful.
Yeah.
It's helpful in that it also exposes people to these careers, because growing up, I didn't have any of that exposure, like zero, none, zilch, it didn't exist. And so it does expose people to these careers, which I actually personally feel is a good thing.
This is kind of a remarkable part of the story, because you, like myself, were raised in a time where counterterrorism was not a topic that we typically brought up at the kitchen table. And so you grow up in Irvine, you go to Woodbridge High School, you go on to USC, your father's a professor, so kind of a win-win situation because you're
pay free tuition
going to school where he teaches. So you already seem to be growing up in a home where curiosity is important. It's probably encouraged. And you join a sorority and you have a roommate, and she says that she's going to drop by a job fair. So you grab your resume, a couple resumes, and you go there. And because she was talking too much to someone at a desk, you swing by a desk where there was somebody from the CIA there. Now, just before that, I don't know, like a year or so before, maybe 2 years, you happen to see an interview that Peter Berg and Peter Arnett are doing with Osama bin Laden. And it sounds like something that he said sparked the first moment of interest. He had not only declared a fatwa, but he made a remark about Jewish people. And you're born and raised in a Jewish home. So that, with this chance meeting at a career fair, kind of begins this journey in reflection of yourself as a younger child, and you have a child yourself. Is there something in you that you think sparked that first moment of interest in a career that would put you in different parts of the world, analyzing information?
I think some of it was, and I feel like I definitely didn't appreciate it at the time because, like, what 11 or 12-year-old does. My parents, like, my dad was a college professor. I clearly grew up, middle class. I never wanted for anything, but we certainly were not, crazy wealthy. But one of the things my parents did was, instead of getting like Hanukkah gifts and birthday presents, we would plan one trip overseas every year. That's what we did.
Cool.
And I think when you're like 13, that's annoying. You don't want to be away from your friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think. I did not fully appreciate it at the time, but the fact that they exposed me to that from pretty young on, and my grandparents were actually travel agents. They lived on Lido Island and owned a travel agency. Yeah, and they owned a travel agency there. And so when I was as early as 2, like, I would go and hang out on the floor there, right? And so I was constantly exposed to my grandparents traveling the world, my parents traveling the world, but the one place we were never allowed to go was the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also part of it is, again, being a young, I don't want to say rebellious because I wasn't rebellious, but I felt like, well, why can't I go to this part of the world? Let's find out about why I can't go here. And so that interested me as well. And so I think the idea of traveling or being overseas and immersing myself in these cultures definitely came from my parents exposing me to that really early on. I think, again, when you're young, it's really annoying to not get a birthday present that you open. But now, right, 46, 47, I realized that was such a gift that they gave me at that time.
Also, if we remember, Peter Jennings was really the only journalist at the time that exposed Americans to the complexities of the Middle East. They changed the name of the show to World News Tonight because he made an effort to expose Americans to international stories. So it is even more remarkable knowing that with the family that you were born into and that spark of interest in international cultures that kind of set forth that experience for you. So you basically are, I don't know, you're signing a letter of commitment with the CIA when you were only 20 years old, with the caveat that you have to graduate from college, which of course you would do. But you must have felt a sense of relief because all of your classmates are stressing as senior year sort of winds down. Like, what is the job that I'm going to have? Were you allowed to tell everybody, I took a job with the CIA?
Yes. So at that time, again, I was not hired as a covert employee. And also at that time, you have to remember, they don't really tell you where you're going and what you're doing until you are physically there, what we call EODing or entering on duty. So I actually didn't know what division I would be working in, what directorate I would be working in, and what job I would have. So when I got that in November, probably 3 weeks after my 21st birthday is when I got that conditional offer of employment. All it was a very blanket, very general offer with obviously a salary, what you kind of come in at salary-wise, what day you should report, if you will, and then Central Intelligence Agency. It's really all it says. So yes, I could tell people that, but I didn't even know where I was working and what I would be doing until I got there.
What was your first appointment?
So my very first thing, I kind of knew where I wouldn't go. So we could start there. No one wants me doing anything with math and science. It's not my jam. So I knew I wouldn't be in what's called the Directorate of Science and Technology. They make all the cool gadgets, do a lot of cyber stuff. It's just not me. Engineers. I knew I wasn't going to be an analyst. Most of the analysts have masters or PhDs in very specific subject matters, right? Like North Korean politics. And I had a broad liberal arts degree, so I knew I wasn't going to go there. I did not have a language because they weren't even recruiting anything remotely. I don't speak another language. I had a feeling I'd end up in what's called the DO or the dark side, the Directorate of Operations. And those are the folks that gather human intelligence. So that is our job. And my very first job in May of 2000 was actually in the Counterterrorism Center, which is where I wanted to be. So I guess I lucked out. But again, this is a pre-9/11 world. So it was Sounds crazy to say now, but it was a very small unit. And it was actually mostly women. It was mostly women.
Were you working with either of the women that are included in the first episode of the series, Cindy and Gina?
Both of them, I believe, were in the Directorate of Intelligence. So they were on the analytical side. So I would feed them information, basically, and then that would be synthesized and then turn into like a product for the president. But both of them, so they would have started in the Counterterrorism Center in like 1996, 1997. So like 4 years before I came. We kind of call both of them like the OGs, if you would, of this.
Now, for the layperson, I think this is really interesting too. If you could explain the difference between military intelligence personnel versus CIA analysts.
I would say that with CIA analysts, most of it, the biggest difference is human intelligence. That's what they're dealing with. With the military, they're mostly gaining what we would call battlefield intelligence, right? So that's individuals that are either gaining like reconnaissance missions through like aircraft, satellites, those kinds of things, and then kind of putting together targeting packages, like where should we invade? Where should, from a tactical perspective. Mm-hmm. In terms of the analytical stuff, it's raw human intelligence. So it is spies that we have recruited in other countries who are willing to give us information on whatever our tasking is. So I would say that's like the biggest difference is that like raw human intelligence.
How long are you working at the CIA before 9/11?
14 months, 15 months, 14 or 15 months. Yes.
And you are put into a group called The Vault. How many people work at it? And how long were you there before 9/11 happens?
Initially, so I'll back up a little bit. What I was doing initially, at CIA, you don't go directly to training. You actually go to headquarters first before they send you to the farm, which is actually kind of cool. They want you to experience headquarters, experience everyone there, make connections, all of that. So that's what I was doing. And mostly what I was doing was looking at terrorist training camps that were in Afghanistan. So like, who's going in, who's going out? Is bin Laden there? Like kind of that type of intelligence work. And I got called into the 7th floor, which is like the principal's office where the director was at the time. And I remember like being so scared because I was 22 maybe at the time, 23. I don't remember. Anywho, I got called up there. It was myself and 2 other gentlemen. And we got what's called read into this program. And I remember thinking, so this would have been just a couple of days before September 11th. And I remember being stupid, right? And saying, hey, are we going to actually have to use this? Because like, I definitely don't know what I think about it. And the director just kind of sat back and said, not unless there's a big attack. And then obviously September 11th happened. And so that was, and I get a lot of flack for this, so I own it. But that was the armed drone program. I was the very, very first person to work it with 2 other gentlemen. And that was a lot, obviously. I'm sure you can imagine right after September 11th. Mm-hmm. It was a lot.
Let's face it, weight loss can feel overwhelming. That's why Hers is changing the game. By providing access to GLP-1 medications plus expert care, they make your goals more achievable. Hers is transforming women's healthcare by providing access to affordable weight loss treatment plans delivered straight to your door if prescribed. Hers offers a holistic weight loss program with personalized solutions including compounded GLP-1 weekly injections featuring the same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy or oral medication kits. So after submitting an online intake form, a licensed medical provider will determine what plan is best for you. And if prescribed, your program includes medication, ongoing care, and online support, and all at one cost. So if you've been struggling with your weight loss journey, it's time for you to find the best option that works for you through Hers. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/KateCasey. That's forhers.com/KateCasey for your personalized weight loss treatment options. forhers.com/KateCasey. Hers weight loss is not available everywhere. Compatible products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions apply. Wegovy and Ozempic are not compounded. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased.
Behind those cozy nights at home, thousands of employees at BP go to work every day. People producing more U.S. natural gas. People building grid-scale solar capacity. people turning landfill waste gas into pipeline-quality renewable natural gas, and people delivering all of that power where it's needed. They're part of the more than 300,000 jobs BP supports across the country. Learn more at bp.com/investing in America.
Walk with me through the day of 9/11 or your experience on 9/11.
Yeah, it's weird. It was such a blur. What's so strange, Kate, is I actually remember exactly what I was wearing that day. Isn't that weird?
Not at all.
You remember what you had on, which seems so superficial. Thousands of people died, right? You remember what you had on, but then there's other things about the day that are just like almost this blank, if that makes any sense. Obviously, I was sitting in the Counterterrorism Center. I was at my cubicle. I was someone that always came to work early. So it was probably 6:45 in the morning, obviously before the attacks had happened. And I would read through like the traffic of the day, what came in overnight, just that kind of stuff. I think a thing people don't realize is we don't bring our phones into work. We're not allowed to. We don't have access to like open internet on our computers. There's special places we have to go for that. And it's a pain. And so I never would, right? Like it's just not something I did. We had TVs, but I don't know, I just didn't turn it on because I was busy working. And my outside phone rang. We have two. We have an internal phone and an external phone. The external phone rang, and it was a colleague who was in an outbuilding. And he was like, "You've got to turn on the TV. Like you got to see what just happened. A plane just flew into the World Trade Center." And at that moment, everyone asked me, "Oh, you must have known." No, because, and again, I think you and I are around the same age, but other people may not remember this. At that time, I believe it was August of 2001. I think it was a Mets or a player accidentally flew his little kind of private Cessna into a very large apartment complex in
Brooklyn.
New York City. Yes, it was Brooklyn. That's what was on the top of my mind. And so that's what I thought it was. It had literally just happened like a month before. But I turned on that TV with just enough time to see the second plane hit. And it was at that exact moment that I 100% knew that this was a terror attack. And it had to be Al-Qaeda. It was too orchestrated. But then we started getting intelligence that they were coming for CIA headquarters. But I mean, obviously, we know it went to the Pentagon. And they started evacuating the agency except for us, because obviously we weren't going to leave. I think it's like an initial shock, right? That hits you. You don't start to think. People asked if I was sad, if I was this, if I was that. I had like no emotions. There's not time to like have an emotion. And the reality is I will never forget. I think it was the next day we had a meeting, and a woman was crying in that meeting, and they told her to leave because it's not because the CIA is this like mean organization. They're not. But I think at that time it was a deputy director who I think has since passed away, and he was great. And he was like, "We don't have time for your tears and being upset right now. We are under attack by a terrorist organization. So until you can get it together, you need to step outside and come back in." And so we weren't allowed to like process how we feel. Like no one cares. People just died. Like we have to stop this attack. But I think obviously later you start to feel this tremendous sense of guilt, like it is your fault, especially because Congress did blame us for it. And I don't know that will ever go away necessarily, that you are responsible for that. But yeah, that was 9/11.
Well, what's interesting too is listening to the Gina and Cindy talk. There were several women that had been vociferous about Osama bin Laden. And they were told in reviews even, you're fixated too much on this. So I think the shame belongs in the people who did not put enough attention on the very things that the women brought forward.
I would agree. And I do think to a certain extent, because I do remember before all of this happened, one of the things that we had noticed, remember I said I was working terror training camps, was that they all went dormant. There was no activity in them for like 2 or 3 months. And we were reporting that. We thought that was weird, this like absence of activity. And no one seemed to care. And a lot of times those women were labeled as like hysterical.
They were.
And that's really wrong. They're not, in my opinion, they're extremely brilliant. I have respect for both of them. Listen, there were some bad calls that were made. There's no question. I mean, one of my former colleagues, Jen Matthews, she was killed in the Camp Chapman attack because of a bad call that she made. But the reality is like, we're not perfect. And I think there was so much non-focus on terrorism at the time that these women were labeled as hysterical. And that is like so wrong.
And it is quite unbelievable to look back in time at that and to think about how much our world has changed since then. Terrorism is a discussion that we have in our homes regularly now.
100%. And I remember when I first EOD'd or started, people made fun of me. They're like, why are you so excited to go to the Counterterrorism Center? It has this weird rap of these like crazy women. It's super small. No one cares. We want to go to the Russia branch. Like that's where the action is. And people would tease me because I was so like excited, right, to go to this, I guess, like underrepresented branch. And now it's interesting because once September 11th happens, all of my bosses, my new bosses and the new centers that were established were all heads of the Russia branches that they brought in.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting how that all changed.
So in the period of time that you worked in the CIA, what characteristics do you believe helped you so much in the job? And I guess that would also mean looking at your other colleagues, because I remember you once noted that you're somebody who in times of stress gets really quiet. And that seems to be like an important characteristic. What are the other things that you think really helped in a job that is super high pressure at a very difficult point in our country's history?
Yeah, so I do get very quiet and calm in times of stress. And that is something that works really well for me, right? Obviously, in a time of stress. I also think, especially when we think about the CIA, even students today want to know, what classes to take and what languages to speak. And all of that is important. But I actually think what helped me the most are probably my soft skills, right? My ability to listen, my ability to think critically, my ability to think out of the box. And I know people get frustrated by that, but that's actually incredibly important because that helps you come up with unusual ways to solve problems, which we actually need, quite frankly. And also, you have to think about it this way. If I'm talking to a terrorist who's in custody, or if I'm trying to recruit a human asset, it's actually not about an acrimonious relationship, which is what I think we think, because that's what we see, right? Beating people up to get confessions, all of that. But that doesn't work. Getting good information and good intelligence, getting someone to spy on their own country, basically commit treason and possibly die, is actually about forming a commonality with them, forming a friendship. What do you have in common as a way that you can then exploit that relationship? And so that works for me. You have to be not a super personable person, because I can be mean, but to be somewhat personable and finding those commonalities rather than those differences.
I always find the thing I can talk about with almost anybody in the entire world are two things: the food they ate growing up and what was their grandmother like. It's just like the thing that everybody in the world is happy to talk about. You don't want to talk about their immediate parents because they may have a difficult relationship, or maybe they're, they might be sick or something. But a grandparent is more distance relationship, and a grandmother usually brings in feelings of warmth. And I feel like if you start there, then that kind of builds a bridge.
I think you would be an excellent spy, Kate. Based on that. And the food, 100%, because I used that quite a bit when I was, especially with terrorists, for some reason, was a real big thing for them.
Because there's so many topics that you think about it could be potentially triggering, right? Yeah. So in all of the time that you're specifically at the CIA, and I ask this because it's such a specific skill set and you kind of just have to meld in with people, what do you know to be true of all people? we all have commonality. What is the thing that you realized in that job that we all kind of share?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. I'm just trying to think about all the people I've met, and all the different walks of life. Everyone, no matter who it was, had a family of some sort. Kind of to your point about grandmothers or parents or siblings, everyone shared that, and everyone engaged in, whether it was me working for the CIA, a terrorist working for Al Qaeda, a spy from another country trying to give us information. Everyone was engaging in that because they felt like they were making their cause, country better. Every single one of them. Now, we may disagree, right, with what they're doing, but they all felt that they were doing the, quote, right thing. None of them felt that they were doing something wrong.
So knowing that, then the plight becomes, how do I dismantle that? Or how do I find the crack in the armor?
100%.
And it seems like you have to have enormous patience because it may take a while for that to happen, for you to get your way in, right?
I think you have to have patience, but one of the things that I learned, especially when I was talking to this particular terrorist at a Black site, you got to get over your damn ego and the idea that you think you know the answers to everything. I'm not a super egotistical person, but I think we all have an ego, right? Like we all have that. And I think I was 24 or 25. I don't remember, but I was talking to this terrorist and I needed answers to a question. They all speak English for the most part. And I needed answers, something very important. And I think, again, you're trying to find that commonality, build a rapport, whatever. And I asked him a question and I was like, obviously I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. And it was, why did you become a terrorist? Why did you engage in this behavior? And I was like, he's a religious fanatic. That's why, obviously. Right. Like that's what I had in my brain. I knew the answer. And what he said really changed my life and perception of how we stop terrorism literally forever. And it was, he said, around that, he was maybe 27, 28 when I was speaking with him. And he said he had been abandoned by his parents when he was 7. So he was a complete orphan. The orphanage he had lived in, he had been kicked out of. He didn't even know how to read and write, to be completely honest with you. He had completely unchecked hepatitis. So he was quite ill. And he was living in basically a storm drain. And he lived in a country that I think we would consider today to be a failed or fragile state, meaning they can't meet basic needs, right, of their citizens. And this guy, a member of Al Qaeda, a very high-ranking member of Al Qaeda, stumbled across him and said, hey, if I give you food, clothing, shelter, school, all the medicine you need, will you come? And he felt completely beholden to them because they gave him everything he needed. And listen, as this girl growing up in Irvine, California, right, who went to USC, that was a level of poverty that I could never understand, never, ever. And it really helped because the information I gleaned from that may seem mundane, but it actually at the time, it went all the way up to President Bush, and he started making policy to help failed and fragile states to mitigate this behavior. It actually continued under multiple presidents, multiple parties. And I think that was really good, right? To get to glean out of that.
It's also really fascinating how thin the line is on radicalization. You just can, and anybody can be radicalized. You find the right person at the right moment of weakness where they really want a sense of belonging and their own identity. And that, to me, is the scariest part. Fascinating and also scary.
Super scary. When I became an FBI agent, I became an FBI agent in the Santa Ana resident agency, so like right back where I'm from, right? So talk about how weird is it to be investigating federal crime, like in your own community, right? That you had no idea any of this existed. And it was interesting. There was this, he was 20 maybe, and he was threatening to kill members of historically Black sororities at Long Beach State. And you cannot do that. That is completely illegal. Obviously, you should be arrested for that behavior. I think we can all agree on that. But it was interesting because we went to go arrest him, and it was in Corona Del Mar. We went to his home. He lived with his mom. Again, he's 20. Like, you would probably expect that. And we knocked on the door. The mom answered, and she let us in. And her son wasn't home. And she's like, "Oh yeah, you can go to his room." When I tell you that must have been wallpapered in swastikas, like, that would be an understatement. And I said to the mom, I was like, "Hello, like, did you not?" I don't know about you growing up, but my mom was in my business and definitely in my room.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Oh, I just thought it was a phase he was going through." And so we went to go arrest him he worked at a Subway, kind of nearby, a Subway sandwich shop.
I know exactly
I remember,
where.
Yeah, and we pulled him out, and I sat with him at the table, and I talked to him a little bit. And he's like, "Well, I joined because, like, I don't feel like I fit in anywhere. I have no friends. And these guys, like, they like me. They make me feel like I'm part of a group. And I feel like I'm important being a part of this. I had no friends in high school. I ended up not going to college. He was at a junior college, and he's like, no one likes me there, but these guys like me." And I was like, wow, okay, so this applies to terrorists, this applies to white supremacists, this applies to all of these different groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting.
Another characteristic I wondered about is inability to diffuse, because you're having all these conversations with, whether it's someone like that or an Al-Qaeda operative, things can get heated. How often did you have to utilize that skill set?
I think it depends, and it depends under what circumstances, if that makes any sense. So a lot of times that skill set, like being able to diffuse, I think because people look at me and underestimate me and don't necessarily think that I can be aggressive. When I do need to diffuse and get really loud, usually people stop immediately because they're like, I don't think I can cuss on here, but holy whatever. You cannot, where did that come from? Mm-hmm. And so it typically makes people stop right away. But again, with diffusing, you can get loud in terms of doing that, right? Like, there's an outward way that you could do that, but then there's also an inward way. And so a lot of times that was just the idea of walking away. Right. Because you've got people, especially when you arrest them, they're spitting in your face, they're cursing at you, whatever. You can't take it personally. And the minute you start taking it personally, then you escalate the situation. And that becomes a bigger problem. And then that's when you end up on the news and in not good situations.
As you write your life story, you're far from finished. Are you looking to close the book on your job? Maybe turn a page in your career? Be continued at the Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. Our professional master's degrees and certificates are designed to meet you where you are and take you where you want to go. At Georgetown SCS, the learning never stops, and neither do you. Write your next chapter. Be continued at scs.georgetown.edu/podcast.
Looking for the ultimate night out? Experience the action from a luxury suite at Capital One Arena. Watch Ovechkin chase history as the Capitals hit the ice, or catch the Wizards take on the NBA's best. Rock out with Disturbed, vibe with Mary J. Blige, or dance the night away with Kylie Minogue. Premium seating, VIP service, and unforgettable moments all under one roof. Book your suite now at CapitalOneArena.com/premier. Capital One Arena. Watch in style, live in the moment.
So you go from the CIA to the FBI. How did you choose to do that? And I also wanted to know about the cultural difference between the CIA and the FBI.
There's a huge cultural difference. So I left the CIA not for any bad reason. I'm still really good friends with people. They were bridesmaids in my wedding in Orange County. I'm still friends with my old bosses there. I left under actually really excellent circumstances, but I realized that the focus of the CIA is obviously to gather intelligence overseas. Like, that's their job. I don't want to change that about them. And I was really tired of living overseas. I think I was totally burned out because of September 11th. I didn't want to live overseas anymore. And I made a actually mature decision. I wasn't running away. I was like, okay, how can I still work counterterrorism, but do so domestically here in the US, right? And not have to continue to move. And so we had FBI agents actually detailed to our office in CIA, and I really liked them. And they sort of helped me along, right, in the application process and all of that. And so then that's gosh, I left the CIA on a Friday. I started at Quantico on a Monday. But I really didn't understand the cultural differences. We look at the gathering of intelligence as female, feminine. I don't know any other way to put that. We are more accepting of females engaging in that. We look at law enforcement, knocking down doors, all of those things as very masculine. I mean, I don't know when you were born, but FBI would not allow females to be agents until 1972. I was born in the 70s.
That's wild. Wild.
That's not that long ago, right? Like that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are in an organization like that, you've got kind of that against you. But I also severely underestimated the amount that the FBI really hated the CIA. And so I think I suffered from some of that as well, right? Like coming from CIA, they really hated us. And so they made my life very miserable during the time that I was at Quantico.
And then you had one boss in particular who was so dismissive that you actually brought it to your father's attention that he had said something that was so upsetting. And of course, your father, who's such a good man, stood up and said, this is not acceptable. But I think it demonstrated how sort of numb you were to it.
Yeah.
Because you had heard such disgusting comments for so long that it took your father going, wait a minute, for you to go, this is not a place that I should be. Have you had any conversations with people that you worked with in that period of time where they've said, you're right, that was a dark period in our time, in the FBI history?
Not people that I worked with directly. And it was weird for me because at CIA, I mean, I served in Afghanistan. Like I was definitely the only female a lot of times, and I never had any issues, literally ever, until obviously I came to the FBI. And it was interesting. I felt like I was pretty much like alone on an island because as mean as the men were, the women were also just as bad. And I think it's because we're such a minority that they don't want to fall victim, right, to be like the next person. And it's sad because now that I'm out, I've actually met some pretty incredible men, and women that work at the FBI that I just sadly never met during my time. But the FBI, so I guess to back up, I actually was not going to put in my book that I was an FBI agent.
Wow.
That's how bad.
Wow.
That's how bad it was. And like, not to get so deep, but I think when stuff like that happens to you, you weirdly feel like a failure. Even though I graduated from Quantico, I did all the right? Like I did everything until I received an email from this woman. And it was the link to the New York Times. And she was on the cover of the New York Times. And it was her and 18 other women. They were all like former Air Force, former Army, like really incredible women. And they had all been excused from Quantico, meaning they failed out of Quantico. I did not. I was lucky and I graduated. And the person that was the head of Quantico at the time was an individual who had given me a really hard time. And they were suing because of gender discrimination. And it was at that moment that I was like, well, nothing really has changed. So I'm definitely going to put it in the book. I was not a part of their lawsuit. I graduated Quantico. But I felt like that was my way that I could, I guess, help them, in terms of shedding light on this. And actually the September of 2024, the very end of September, it was the largest settled gender discrimination lawsuit against any federal entity in the U.S. in its history. And so those women won. And my hope is that we are going to change how we treat women in the agency. But I view those women as the courageous ones to try to spark that kind of change.
Without question. Of the experiences that you had at the CIA and FBI, I wondered if the people that you work with, the relationships are important to you, especially for the CIA, because there's so few people that you can really talk about your work experience to.
So my very, very, very good friend, who's still my good friend, every September 11th, we text each other because we were with each other. She is whose house I went to after that very long day and like decompressed because she was not in the Counterterrorism Center. She was in a different area of the CIA at that time. And so she just became, I guess, this like sounding board for me that honestly no one will ever understand. And I think we're never going to, you're right. I mean, it's just a bond. And I think too, when you think about it, when you go overseas, undercover. My parents didn't know my cover. So you have to remember, if I die, I have to find a friend at the agency to give all of that information to. And she was that person. So they become your family like really, really quickly. Because if you think about it, they kind of have to be. And I can't see a time where we will ever not be friends and that will like never change, I think.
So you left and then you went into teaching, which is quite funny because that was actually your first dream in life, was to be a teacher. And you became a history teacher at your old high school, working with the teacher that meant so much to you. And then you eventually moved to Dallas and worked at Ursuline, which is my friend Ashley's alma mater. And now you're in Dallas, married and have a child. I wonder how your lens through which you look at life may be different from others because of your experience working at the CIA.
I mean, it's definitely different. I mean, I will never forget being in a principal's office, not because I'd gotten in trouble, but we have to have our yearly like goals meetings, with principals every year. And I remember him saying something like, you just got to trust me. And I looked at him and I was like, I don't trust anyone. Like, I don't trust anyone. Like, full stop. I don't trust you. I don't trust anyone. And I think that comes off to people as bitchy, but I'm not. It's just, I wish people could understand, like, I am the sum of all of my experiences, right? And so it's like never going to go away. But no, I don't trust people. I just don't. I'm never unkind, but I certainly don't put all of my trust into people. And so, yeah, I'm very much formed by my experiences. That's for sure.
Why do you think you don't trust people based on your experience?
Because I've definitely seen the worst, of humanity, obviously. And I've definitely seen the full scope of what people are capable of. And it's not like pretty. I'm very lucky. I have diagnosed PTSD, but I'm extremely lucky in that, my husband has good health care, right? And so I am so lucky. But I think a lot of people, because what you mentioned before at CIA, we're not considered veterans. So we don't get those same benefits. And a lot of people turn to things that are not healthy, to cope with that. And I rage tweeted.
No, I love this story. This is one of my favorite stories.
I rage tweeted my senator here in Texas because I found out that he was the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So I was like, well, why not? I live here. And so I rage tweeted him that, nothing is being done to help former CIA officers from a mental health perspective. And he reached out. And he had no idea that we weren't considered veterans and that nothing was being done. And they actually ended up passing a $10 million package for mental health care for officers that left in good standing. Either they retired or, like me, they left on their own, but, not because of any trouble. So that was, I guess, great because we can't go to the VA and collect if that's something that we need. And I know I'm just in a lucky position in that I am provided, for under healthcare.
Well, first of all, thank you for doing that. And think of all the people that you will help. I wonder too if, because of your experience, do you find that you're skeptical of people in social situations? Do you find that it takes you time to warm up to people? Are you somebody who finds yourself researching people? Are there other ways that experience has changed who you are, prior to joining the CIA?
Yes, all your listeners are going to think I'm an awful person, Kate. But yes, I do research people. I do.
Well, by the way, do you think that people that are listening to this who were never in the CIA but think they were in the CIA of America, they do that too? I don't know if that's that unusual, though.
I think in this day and age, it's probably not. I will say I'm definitely an introverted extrovert. I do like not going out and being in large groups. That one-on-one is much better for me because I do become very overwhelmed in large groups of people, particularly people that I don't know. And that's, people think that I'm some extroverted person. I'm not. I'm very much an introvert, and I would much rather not be social because so many things start going through my mind and then it becomes stressful for me, which is why I sort of will, I guess, retreat. But I used to be pretty extroverted because, I mean, remember, I was in a sorority. I definitely did my fair share of partying and all of the things, but I've definitely taken sort of a left turn away from that.
So I always wondered when I would hear about the job of a CIA agent, I'd think the person typically should be more of an introvert, a chameleon, doesn't like to be the center of attention. Would you say that that's probably accurate?
Yes, and I think that's why I was successful. I'd rather not be the center of attention at all. I like to, I guess, blend in. When I went back and taught right at the same high school I went to, no one remembered me except for my dance team coach, which obviously she would have had a more personal relationship with me. And then the teacher that I ultimately taught for, he did not remember me at all as a student, didn't remember me at all because I just blended in. I did not stick out in any way, shape, or form, not in a bad way as a behavior problem, and then not in a good way as sort of this overly incredible student.
The great thing is that probably didn't even offend you.
No, not at all. I definitely didn't care.
And what I love about that is we live in a time where social media currency is so important. There are a generation of kids that feel like to be an influencer is to be a success. And there are people that are listening to this show who may be thinking about a career move, or maybe they're raising children that are just trying to figure out what the best job for them. And there are many people who are introverts who have that analytical mind that they love to travel. This is like putting wind in their sails. They're like, this sounds like me. What is your advice for somebody who may have a moment of thinking a job in intelligence might be the place for me?
I say apply. I think a lot of times, especially because I teach college now, like I mentioned before, I get students who want to know what to major in, what language, all of the things. Listen, I do think, obviously, looking at CIA's website, seeing what their critical languages are, is clearly going to help you get a leg up if you speak one of those languages. But I don't think we should be deterred by the fact that we may not. I have a student going through the interview process right now, actually, who is an English major, who does not speak other languages. And she's pretty much all the way through the process right now. I think also because of what we see on social media that you mentioned and all of those things, students, kids, young adults, think that if I don't match this picture of what I'm supposed to be, I shouldn't apply. And the problem is if you don't do that, you're telling yourself no. Like the worst answer you are going to get when you submit an online application is either no response, whatever, big deal, move on, or no. Again, whatever, big deal, move on. But you're never going to know that the answer can be yes if you don't apply. And so I think because sometimes social media can be bad in the sense that people feel if they don't fit whatever this profile is supposed to be, that they're picturing in their heads that this isn't the job that they should have. And that's not good, in my opinion.
I'm so happy for you that you became a teacher. But you became a better teacher because of the experiences that you had in intelligence. And I'm so happy for the students that get the experience of listening to you and learning from you. And again, I'm very grateful for the work that you did, the time that you served, and our nation owes a huge debt of gratitude to you.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate it.
Well, tell everybody where they can get your book and where they can follow you.
You can get my book, I think, on Amazon, Target, The Unexpected Spy. Feel free to check it out. I would love that. I am the national security contributor now for NewsNation. So I'm under contract with them, and I'm on a couple of times a week. I'm the only female ex-CIA person on the news. And again, representation matters. So I'm very passionate about the work I do for NewsNation. They've been incredible. And then also, I guess to the point of social media, I do have a social media platform, The Unexpected Spy, where I break down national security issues in 3 minutes or less in a very apolitical way, because I think it's important to just have that information. So that's what I'm doing now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
The amazing Kate Casey.
I want to thank my fantastic guest, Tracy Walder, and remind you, make sure that you are subscribed to this podcast. I would love it if you left a 5-star review. Make sure that you join the Facebook group, Reality Life with Kate Casey. You can get even more episodes, bonus episodes. You can find it on the Apple Podcast, but also on Patreon at patreon.com/Kate Casey. And also make sure that you get my what to watch list of what to watch every week in unscripted TV by going to katecasey.substack.com and follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at KatecaseyCA, TikTok, it's Kate Casey, and Twitter and Threads and Blue Sky at Kate Casey. Now listen, make sure that you listen next week. I've got my what to watch list episode on Monday, but Tuesday, I have an interview with the co-directors of American Manhunt, Osama bin Laden. It is a must-listen to episode, and I have to tell you, you have to watch that docuseries. It airs March 10th on Netflix. Excellent.
This country was built on a distinctly American work ethic. But today, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries. And with that, we sent away good jobs and diminished our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make a variety of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more. All made right here in the USA. From growing the cotton to adding the final touches. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs for seamsters, cutters, and factory workers in towns and cities across the United States. And it's about more than an income. Jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.